Every once in a while, you may come across someone whose emotions give them a knack for starting arguments. These people never take the blame for their actions and may even turn on those they're close to who disagree with them. These are just a few of the multiple destructive behaviors that Bill Eddy would classify as characteristics of a high-conflict personality. As president of the High Conflict Institute, Eddy has spent the past 15 years studying and working with high-conflict people, as well as helping their partners and bosses through situations that arise from these relationships. But what exactly is an HCP, or high-conflict person?
High-conflict people are people who have really a narrow pattern of behavior that repeats a lot. They have a lot of all-or-nothing thinking. They see people as all good, people as all bad. They often have intense and unmanaged emotions, so they get distracted by these emotions and they have a hard time staying focused on problem solving. They have extreme behavior or threats of extreme behavior, but most of all, they're preoccupied with blaming others and they can't look at themselves. And this pattern of behavior gets them into relationships, into romantic relationships, workplace relationships, legal relationships that then blow up.
Eddy is also author of the book Trump Bubbles, The Dramatic Rise and Fall of High-Conflict Politicians, in which he discusses HCPs who have both been in office or are running for office. These bubbles occur when emotion trumps thinking in politics.
I looked in this book back at history. I've got several other personalities that were apparent high-conflict politicians, and they had this rise and fall pattern, just like a bubble. So that's where this came from. Emotions trump thinking, and the emotions rise. That's when the bubble rises. And then they overreach, reality sets in, and the bubble bursts. And it's not usually until they do some damage that people go, oh my goodness, I never thought this person would do such a thing. And it's predictable if they have this pattern of behavior.
But how do these high-conflict people gain power in the first place? Well, certain circumstances definitely give them a leg up in obtaining both the love and support of the people who vote for them.
It seems to be an emotional aspect, and it's maybe part of our human nature, part of our DNA, that we like to follow strong leaders. And especially when we think it's a time of danger and crisis and change, we're kind of looking for what should we do? Things are complicated. Life is complicated. And so a leader that can make things really simple is very seductive. So you've got people that are kind of hungry for direction. Then you have a system of communicating with them, a broadcast system. So you have an emotional media widespread system. That's the second ingredient. And the third ingredient is you have a very high conflict personality who's willing to manipulate the media message so that it manipulates the vulnerability.
According to Eddy, biology, specifically the biology of our brain, affects our either conservative or liberal point of view.
Some people seem to have a brain that interprets things as more fearful than other people. The amygdala is kind of the smoke alarm in the brain that's triggered by danger and tells you drop everything and run or drop everything and fight. A third of the population seems to have this fear bias, so more easily hooked by things that look and sound fearful. On the other hand, there's a lot of people who are born with more of a novelty bias, and so seeking new experiences, new people, things that are new, maybe exciting. Looking at it politically, you often have conservatives, and there's some research that's been done that show a larger right amygdala for people who identify as very conservative in a research study that was done in England. So they do interpret things as more dangerous. And then they found that the people identified as very liberal had a larger part of the left hemisphere, which is more the novelty-seeking, balancing conflicting ideas, and excited about that.
And that's when us versus them really comes into play. This tactic, better known as splitting, is extremely popular in politics. It keeps supporters fiercely loyal, defensive of their views and their leader, and ready to act against anyone who disagrees with them. political scientist and author of the book On Behalf of the President, Presidential Spouses and White House Communication Strategy Today. Lauren A. Wright, Ph.D., explains why and how this works.
When people have a common enemy, sometimes they can unite more easily, but if the interests are more clearly defined for people and it's articulated what's at stake and there's an element of fear added, then that all contributes to a more simple message where people can understand it and rally around it.
Because of today's media coverage of elections, we can easily make up our minds about candidates without having to make up our mind at all. Facial expression and tone of voice can be absorbed by our brain, causing us to mirror the candidate's emotions, often unconsciously. This was the case in the first ever televised presidential debate in 1960.
There's that famous Kennedy-Nixon debate that people always go back to, where some people listened to it on the radio and they thought Nixon won, and some people watched it on TV and they thought Kennedy won. And political experts at the time attributed that to the fact that Kennedy looked really relaxed and in control, and Nixon was uncomfortable and shifting and sweating. So absolutely, it can make a difference.
This unconscious absorption of expression is what makes it easy for high-conflict personalities in politics to spread their anger to voters, as well as establish a loving relationship between them, even though they've never met. Whether you're dealing with the high-conflict person themselves or someone who just supports them, Eddie suggests that you use EAR statements to keep them calm in conversation.
EAR stands for empathy, attention, and respect. So when you're talking with someone who's upset, you can calm them with empathy, attention, and respect and say, I can see how hard it is, and I know how important this is to you, and I'll pay attention to your concerns, and I respect your efforts. And a lot of this is tone of voice.
Bill Eddy discusses high-conflict personalities and Trump bubbles with their predictable rise and fall patterns in further detail in his book, Trump Bubbles, available on unhookedbooks.com. You can also check out highconflictinstitute.com for more information on high-conflict people. You can find out more about Mark Smith on his faculty profile at cedarville.edu/CPS. For more information on Lauren Wright, you can find her website at laurenawright.com. Wright invites you to read her book about First Ladies titled On Behalf of the President. For more information about all of our guests, log on to our site at viewpointsonline.net. You can find archives of past programs there and on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm Gary Price.